Joining us now here outside the White House is Shailesh Kumar, senior analyst on Asia. The Eurasia Group was also part of the Obama administration, was part of the Treasury Department. Shailesh, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Let me start by asking you about what do you believe is going to be the big headline really from this visit?
I think the big takeaway from the visit is going to be the U.S.-India strategic partnership. And that's one of the reasons why Prime Minister Modi is coming here to visit with Donald Trump, President Trump. It's to continue the policies that were carried forward by both Presidents George Bush and Obama to make sure that India does not fall off the radar.
Yeah.
And so I think the big takeaway you're going to see is that there's going to be a continuation of policy and that India and U.S. are committed partners and that they're going to deepen the defense ties as they go forward.
Defense is, of course, an area where we've seen a lot of momentum building up, especially over the last 3 years, between 2013 and 2016, in terms of defense. India and the U.S., the U.S. has now emerged as the #1 partner for India in defense contracts, surpassing even Russia. So do you believe that this is going to be the big area of opportunity in the future?
Yeah, it's a natural place where the U.S. and India can work together. There's a natural there's a common perception when it comes to defense in the region or threats in the region, whether it be from China or whether it be terrorism that emanates from Pakistan. So both India and the U.S. have aligned views when it comes to risks and threats in the region. So there's natural cooperation that can take place on the defense front. On the economic side, it also fits into that too, because there's a lot of talk about F-16s.
Yes.
If they're made in India, it's going to undermine Trump's "Make America Great Again" pledge. But I don't agree with that because if the assembly lines are shifted to India, there is a possibility for the planes to be built in India, for them to create jobs in India, and for U.S. suppliers for the F-16 to also have a new business opportunity.
So you don't see it naturally contradictory?
Right. It can actually be complementary, and it can work together. And on the terrorism front, you mentioned terrorism earlier. Terrorism is something that we know Trump takes very seriously. He spoke about it aggressively on the campaign trail. And we know India is very concerned about terrorism. So I do think terrorism is a natural avenue for Modi to raise with Trump. He'll have an eager audience. He can talk about India's concerns, and maybe
specifically Pakistan, because India has very categorically stated that U.S. military aid is being diverted to hurt India's interests by Pakistan specifically.
Yeah.
So what do you believe is likely to be the conversation around Pakistan specifically?
I think what we can expect is Prime Minister Modi will talk about Pakistani terrorism. He's going to make it a point to talk about that this is a destabilizing effect on the region. We've already seen America has withdrawn some of the coalition support funds that they typically give to Pakistan on an annual basis. That number has come down. So there is some momentum on this front. On the point of terrorism, though, I think with Trump, you'll find an eager audience, and I think Modi will be able to convince Trump on this point. And this is, again, where the defense argument comes into play, where if America and India can work together to fight a common enemy, which is terrorism, it's a perfect opportunity for the two to work together.
Okay, so defense and terror, those are the two big issues that you believe we should expect something meaningful from both sides on this visit. Outside of that, on deepening commercial engagements, on trade specifically, on H-1B, do you believe H-1B will be brought up in any significant way, or do you believe that India at this point in time will perhaps leave it for another conversation?
I think they'll bring it up, not in a significant way. And the reason is Prime Minister Modi has signaled in the past that this is really a commercial issue between private industry and it's a U.S. immigration policy debate. There's very little the Prime Minister can do to change the way what Congress is doing, for example. Congress has its own bills that are moving forward. U.S. government agencies have their own agenda when it comes to the topic. There's very little he can leave Washington with on H-1B visas in terms of a commitment, so there's really no point in bringing it up. If anything, it's better for Indian industry to deal with it.
And for U.S. industry to bring this up.
Right.
I mean, CEOs of Silicon Valley are meeting Prime Minister Modi on Sunday morning. They will, of course, raise this issue with Prime Minister Modi, but they ought to be raising this with President Trump in a more significant way.
Right. And I think if you get the pressure from the business community, the message will be different than when a Prime Minister raises it. On the commercial side, I haven't seen a lot of interest on both sides, for example, for a free trade agreement. I haven't seen much interest on the Indian side for a bilateral investment treaty. There hasn't really been a lot of momentum.
No.
So one of my views on this is that I don't think Prime Minister Modi is as interested in trade as he is in inward investments. So the topic of trade may come up in terms of the U.S. concerns about the U.S.-India trade deficit.
Yeah.
But even at that level, the trade deficit is only $24 billion.
And nothing in comparison to China.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's 1/10 of what it is for China.
Yeah.
So it's not as contentious of an issue as it's sometimes made out to be. So again, there's really not much to talk about on trade. Whatever there is to talk about, it's a little negative, so they may not even bring it up. Trump may bring it up because he has to. But I think H-1Bs, maybe they'll talk about it, nothing deep. Trade, they'll talk about it, nothing deep again, though.
I was just reading out, for the benefit of our viewers, this letter that's been written by congressman here ahead of the visit of Prime Minister Modi, raising issues around IPR, raising issues around market access, raising the stent price cap issue, for instance. Do you believe that that's going to be something that the administration, the Trump administration, will take up?
I don't think so, because we typically see this type of behavior anytime a foreign leader comes, anytime an Indian leader comes. Congress writes letters, good and bad, in terms of what they feel about the relationship.
And on the IPR side, I mean, you know, America's concerns have been a tad exaggerated when it comes to India specifically.
Well, I think there is some fair concerns on the U.S. industry side on this point, but I just don't think it'll raise to the level of a debate or a discussion, because again, when you see these types of letters produced by Congress, they're really done for constituencies in America, good and bad, and they have to do it, and they did do it. But I don't think it's going to be the focal point of the discussion. Okay,
so not much expected on trade either. You know, the role that India can play when we talk about Pakistan, but also Afghanistan specifically, and there is a review that's currently underway. What is your expectation on the South Asia policy for the U.S.?
So I think there's been a massive change when it comes to U.S. policy towards the region. As we know, 20 years ago, there was a hyphenation policy when it comes to India-Pakistan. That's pretty much gone now. There has been a very noticeable shift from U.S. posture in favor of India, and that's ongoing. The review is underway, as you just mentioned. I think the timing of the visit is interesting because this gives Prime Minister Modi a very good chance to help influence that review so that the U.S. administration is more in line with India's outlook on the region. I think when it comes to Afghanistan, India obviously has a very strong vested interest in making sure Afghanistan is safe and secure. This concerns Pakistan. Pakistan has made this point clear to the Americans. But what we have seen is that America still is taking the side of India. And you're seeing this with the fact that what's come out of the strategic review is that there may be a discussion about removing Pakistan's status as a major non-NATO ally. There may be a more hard line when it comes to America towards Pakistan. So there is a subtle but yet important shift taking place here in the U.S. administration. It's been going on for the past 20 years. With Trump, I just think that you're going to see it move more and more in that direction.
What about China? You know, there are reports suggesting that China is watching this meeting between Trump and Modi very closely. India has, of course, raised its concerns quite publicly as far as the One Belt, One Road is concerned. The U.S. did send a delegation in for the OBOR summit. But how do you see the India-Pakistan-China arrangement?
Yeah, so I think, again, this is an area of confluence where what India's views are on China, America understands and respects. OBOR or BRI or the Belt Road Initiative, the offset of it or the offshoot of it is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. And India has been very vocal and clear about its concerns with CPEC. I think there is a receptive audience here in America because it goes beyond CPEC. It goes to the argument of what is China's intent in South Asia, what is China's intent in the Indian Ocean region. And this is an issue that America takes very seriously.
Do you think this will come up?
I think so. I think maritime security, joint patrols potentially, or an overall respect and understanding for India's sensitivities when it comes to what China's activities are in the region will come up. And I think because of this particular U.S. administration's view on China, or just in general the U.S. view on China and where China is headed, it's another area where you'll see a very receptive audience.
So you said that there's going to be continuity, or at least you expect continuity. And there was a significant momentum that was built with the Obama administration and Prime Minister Modi on several areas. You know, we've got 30 working groups between India and the U.S. that are working on a bunch of issues. Strategic and commercial dialogue has been very, very active and has deepened quite significantly over the last 3 years. Do you see a departure on any front at all in any of these areas?
It's still too early to tell, and we've seen this play out before. So to give you an example, when President Bush first came into office, there was a high right before it because Bill Clinton had just gone to India, and I think a lot of people felt that the relationship was deflating a little bit. And eventually we saw it come on the upswing with the civil nuclear deal. When President Obama came in, the same thing. Things felt a little deflated. So the first 6 months to 1 year in any administration are a little too early to tell whether you're going to see some dialogues fall off or some new dialogues come up. I think what's important, though, is that for this meeting, Prime Minister Modi is coming really to set the tone, to set a personal relationship, to make sure that, like the past, they can carry forward the relationship in the years to come. So I think it's a little too early to really dissect that part just yet, but I am fairly optimistic about the
Climate change, do you believe that that's going to be a difficult conversation?
I don't think it'll come up. And the reason is it falls into this other camp where what Trump has said about India is
the billions and billions and billions of dollars that he talked about. So you don't think that this is going to be a conversation that's going to happen?
Because Trump said it for his audience. I think the Prime Minister recognizes it. Every leader has to make comments for their audience. The Paris Agreement or adherence to Paris Agreement for India is actually a huge commercial opportunity. I mean, we're already seeing the boon in solar energy that's being created. So there's very little for Prime Minister Modi to gain by raising and complaining or chastising President Trump on the issue and saying what you said was wrong. Because, again, it won't change anything. Trump will have to keep saying what he does, and the Prime Minister will have to say what he does. Bringing it up, there's really no point.
On the issue of trade, even though you don't expect anything significant on that, President Trump, without naming India, had raised the issue of high duties, specifically in the case of Harley as an instance. Yeah. Do you believe that this is going to be something that perhaps the two sides will look at?
I think, of the issues, when the trade deficit does come up, I would imagine that President Trump will say to India, look, your duties are too high, something needs to be done to reduce import duties, or the overall import regime needs to be changed. But it's not going to be a contentious point. The Harley-Davidson example that you raised, again, that was a campaign trail point. And it falls into the Paris Agreement rhetoric, where he's speaking really to his domestic audience to show that he's tough on investments, tough on trade, tough on climate change, for example, or belief on climate change. So I don't think they'll raise it in a very contentious way. That's not what I think either side is looking for in this first arrangement. A lot of those issues will be talked about behind the scenes. It's really for the agencies to talk about. Now, one of the concerns is President Trump has not filled all of his India posts still.
Yes.
So a lot of senior positions in this administration...
What do you make of the choice for the Indian ambassador?
So it's still not confirmed. But if we presume that Juster will be the ambassador, I think it's a positive signal. You have an individual who understands India, who's worked on India, who has a good relationship with the Indian government, and from my understanding, the Indian government also respects and values him. So of the potential names, I think it's a very positive signal. When we finally hear that it's confirmed, then we can hopefully move on.
Perhaps on this visit.
It might be something they announce, actually.
So, if I were to ask you to crystal ball gaze for us, what are the 2 or 3 things that you do expect them to announce this time around?
I think the drones, which they've already done.
Yes.
I think more movement on the fighter jet deal. It's still a little opaque, but I think you'll see something there. I think a harder line on Pakistan is going to come out of this. You've seen it in past joint statements. For example, the Modi-Obama joint statement was fairly harsh on Pakistan. I think that can continue forward. Again, because this president is new, because he has a specific view on terrorism, you will probably see a lot on terrorism come out of this, or efforts to curb terrorism in the region.
Okay, so that's expected to be the big headline, according to you. But many thanks, Shailesh, for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, with that, it is time for us to take another break, but there's a lot more that's coming up here on CNBC TV 18 as our special broadcast continues from Washington, D.C., outside of the White House.